In the last few battles I have talked about skirmishers and why I think they are less than useful in the current iteration of Total War Rome 2. And I think this battle is a good example why. Now I have to qualify that statement a bit because some skirmishing units are extremely useful. That goes for horse skirmishers, for hybrid skirmishers, for some peltas that have good armor and can function in melee after they have spent their missiles. But overall, I find, and this may not be true for all players, players that have very good micromanagement and can micromanage a lot of units at once, I find that skirmishers tend to force a playstyle that is not optimal if you want to be aggressive. So in this case, I chose horse skirmishers. My opponent has chosen foot skirmishers. Now, my horse skirmishers cost more than his foot skirmishers. They are going to allow me to move into the back of my opponent, and these hybrid skirmishers, I call them hybrid skirmishers just because they have melee capabilities as well, they are going to necessitate that my opponent is going to support or protect his skirmishers with his own cavalry. So by virtue of having these cavalry units posted here, I'm now able to tie up both my opponent's cavalry and his skirmishers. If he moves away his cavalry, I can attack his skirmishers. If he moves away his skirmishers, I can attack his cavalry. So he is in a bit of a pickle here. He also has to use these units to protect his skirmishers, which means that his front line consists of 5 of these veteran legionaries, while I have 6 noble swords. That can potentially be very important. I'll just fast forward here because now it's just me posting units at my opponent's rear. Some minor skirmishes going on. Over here I'm charging into auxiliary cavalry and into Praetorian cavalry. Here's just a bum rush to do as much damage as possible before my opponent disengages. And yeah, not really a whole lot, but auxiliary cavalry and Praetorian cavalry are pretty decent units. Sending in my mercenary Thracians to do some more damage to the retreating enemy horse, and I at least managed to take down some of his auxiliary cavalry. But of course this isn't an engagement that I want to be in for a prolonged amount of time, so I'm going to pull back. Sometimes I notice that I don't have the desire to play the game as well as it should be played, but I've had a break from Total War Rome 2 now, and I find that after a break I can play a bit more carefully or think things through a bit better. So I might have just rushed in other cases, but here I check the stamina of my guys. They are winded, and I'm going to rest them before sending them in, and I'm going to take these Praetorian cavalry on a little chase. This is of course a very good exchange for my mercenary Thracians. They're able to tire out these very expensive Praetorian cavalry, and they also should be able to take down some of them with their javelins. Javelins have a bonus against large. So, more of the same, Soco Equites Extraordinary, chasing after horses and getting killed. This is all going to be very important in the late game. Now my opponent's skirmishers have done absolutely nothing. The only thing my opponent's skirmishers have done so far is to tie up units that were trying to defend them. So that was pretty cool. I haven't seen that before. Hey, okay, so skirmishers not really paying for themselves here and necessitating a more defensive posture than perhaps my opponent would have liked. I don't know. Certainly, it works to my favor. Now my opponent is going to separate, and that is going to open up for some Thracian horse to come in and attack them. But I'm not going to do so just yet. I'm going to pull back, be a bit more patient, pull back my noble swords, rest them. I don't want them going in against fresh troops if they are winded or active. And basically just separating, using my mobility to separate my opponent's troops. just trolling. I love this. Just trolling around with the mercenary Thracians, throwing a javelin now and then, riding around. And it looks like my opponent is starting to get tired of this, so we are forming up into battle formations. Still, I'm conserving these guys. I haven't really done a huge amount of damage. These guys have killed some horse, but not really anything impressive yet. But here it comes. Now, since my line is, I have 6 of these noble swords. My opponent has put up 5 of these veteran legionaries, and these other guys are just hanging back because they were defending the skirmishers, and still are actually. And the same for these guys. I'm going to be able to take on these guys head on and do very well. Now, these noble swords would do very well anyway. They would massacre veteran legionaries on the charge. They have a very good charge bonus. And just now the auxiliary Syrian archers are managing to start firing, but it is way too late. If you look at the veteran legionaries here, they are dropping really quickly, and the skills on the auxiliary Syrian archers not really going up fast enough to affect the battle in a meaningful way. Veteran legionaries are getting absolutely destroyed. Some kills on these Syrian archers, but again, they are not paying for themselves. And now I'm also able to pull away his cavalry, just skirmish it away. And but he's going to pull them back to, presumably, to again protect his Syrian archers. So, but while my back lines are just nice and open, keeping a spear unit nearby in case he's going to swing around some cavalry, but it doesn't look like he has any plans of doing so because he has to protect his own skirmishers. So it kind of becomes a sunken cost fallacy that you have to protect these guys, although it's really hurting your army, because imagine if my opponent was able to swing around here and go for rear charges on these guys. That would have been pretty good. Instead, he's stuck here defending these guys that are getting barely 10 kills and being chased away by spears. So this is a pretty good demonstration of why I am not a huge fan of skirmishers currently. Especially it's actually even a more relevant battle than a lot of other battles because of the terrain. This is the Metosana. The map is pretty damn flat. If you're able to secure a hill advantage, bringing some skirmishers might actually be a good idea if you're able to, or if you're going to try to force an opponent off a hill and you have the ranged advantage, that might actually work very well in your favor too. But on a flat map like this, where cavalry is able to roam at will, where you can see everything all the time, it's really hard to use skirmishers effectively if you're up against a cavalry advantage. And like you can see here, I was able to tie down significant amount of my enemy's forces with just these few cheap mercenary Thracian cavalry and some bow horse. That's about it. And my opponent used a significant amount of resources or units that weren't close to paying for themselves. Now they're about to die, and that's all she wrote. And that's why I like these mounted skirmishers as well. Although their damage potential isn't as impressive as it is for these auxiliary Syrian archers, they can get out of trouble just by virtue of being really fast, go for rear shots and stuff like that. So now the Roman army is starting to fall apart here under my Dacian horde. These veteran legionaries, they arrived a bit too late to the party, got a lot of kills, but mainly against these spear units. And then they're going to get fed some more spear units, which is going to increase their kills extremely quickly. But it's just there to hold them for a while I take care of these guys with my swords and pour some more fire into the general. Should be going down fairly quickly. So not getting a huge amount of kills on these bow horse really, but they contributed in a meaningful way. And they've contributed not as much in getting kills, but they contributed to, I think, to making my opponent move his forces where I wanted them. So, as you can see, pretty good job on my noble swords. These guys, have no idea what these guys did with 100 kills. Must have been routing units. These guys did well, but these guys, veteran legionaries, and here you have another kind of problem with the elite and these sort of sub-elite units. Elite units will absolutely destroy these sub-elites, and if you bring this type of build, I am going to win the infantry fight, and the archers and cavalry has to pick up the slack and go for rear charges and shoot my superior guys to death. But it's not going to be easy when this heavy cavalry has to chase after this light cavalry, and there's also these very cheap but very annoying spears on the field. So this army is brought with that in mind. There are a lot of units here able to tie up and get kills on cavalry, but they are extremely cheap, but there are many of them. And then there's this rock solid line of infantry that can take on the Roman infantry head on and defeat them. So quite like that army, and a pretty good display of why I am not a fan of foot skirmishers. I really like mounted skirmishers, but foot skirmishers in a competitive setting, they can work, but I find them to be pretty damn annoying to use. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again on the battlefield.